Okay. Again, good morning. Welcome to the monthly webinar hosted by the Division of Housing, Office of Rental Assistance. This month, we're going to be talking about our program monitoring and file audits that will be happening again in 2023. We've had a long break from it as a result of COVID and several waivers that HUD allowed public housing authorities to apply for so that we could manage our programs without a lot of additional administrative obstacles in the midst of a worldwide pandemic. So we are back. We suspect that we have a lot to dig into with files and program compliance. So I wanted to give you all some insight into what that's going to look like. I do have a lot of new staff who have joined my team since the pandemic, and so several of them, this will be new for them as well. So rest assured, we will be training our staff prior to the monitoring and file audits. But wanted to give you guys some of the tools that we will be using to give you a heads up. There's no gotcha moments, similar to how audits and file audits and program monitoring happened back when I was a coordinator 20 or so years ago. HUD or the Division of Housing or Supportive Housing and Homeless Programs back then would just show up on a day that they agreed to show up, and we didn't know what files they were going to be looking at. We're doing it a little different. We want to give everyone a good idea of what we're looking for in the file audits and the monitoring. And so I did provide all of the tools as attachments in the email that was sent this morning so that you know, and they will be made available on the website. And just a quick apology, winter break has begun. So I do have some rambunctious little ones in the house that have been told to not interrupt me. But if you know how kids are, you know that doesn't always work. And I have Dee Horton and Kimberly Dickey monitoring the chat and the question and answer module. So please direct your questions there. The chat, you should be able to chat the panelists, Kimberly and Dee, any of your questions. If you prefer to use chat, you can also use the Q&A function. Okay, so just a quick overview of what we'll be covering today. We're going to talk about our monitoring program. We will talk about file audits, and we will go over some updates. So what is our monitoring program? Well, we have our largest voucher program that we administer at the Division of Housing is the Housing Choice Voucher Program, which is a federally funded program. And as you can imagine, there are a lot of regulations and policies in place that we have to follow when we are spending the federal government's money. And things we should be following spending anyone's money, to be really honest, but the federal government checks on us a little bit more. And so HUD audits us, the Division of Housing, frequently, infrequently, it really depends. But the Office of the State Auditor, because the Colorado Division of Housing is a state agency, audits us every year. So they use HUD's audit and monitoring documents to do that. So we essentially are undergoing a HUD audit on an annual basis for our Housing Choice Voucher Program. So in order for us to be in compliance with the results of those audits, we need to be able to see the files and see the way the program's being administered at the local level. The Division of Housing is a unique housing authority in a way. We do not administer the vouchers directly from our office, with the exception of a few programs. Instead, we rely on all of you as our partner agencies to do that administration for us in your local communities. And so when HUD looks at public housing authorities, they assume we all just have our files, right? We have access to our files in the file room or in our digital world that we are moving to. And we can just grab anything for them that they ask for. Of course, it's a little different because you all have our files. And so it takes us a little time to get what HUD needs. So in between the HUD and or the Office of the State Auditor's audit, we need to get out to see you guys and to see your files to make sure everything is being administered in compliance with the federal regulations. Again, I'm really going to focus on the Housing Choice Voucher federal program, because right now our monitoring and our file audit procedures are sort of exist because of that, but it is widespread and we are able to use this monitoring and file audit for other programs as well. But do know for purposes of this next year, we're really going to be focusing on Housing Choice Vouchers. So our monitoring allows really for a one-on-one in-depth discussion between you, the agency, and my staff, the Division of Housing's single point of contact, who is assigned to your agency. I believe many of you are meeting on a weekly or bi-weekly basis with your SPOC to talk about your programs, questions that you have, maybe provide some training. But what this really does is we have a guided tool that we'll go over where the SPOC can sit down with you and just have a discussion about, show me where your files are, show me where the inactive files are. Let's look at the different forms you're using. Where did you find this form? Show me what version of the admin plan you are currently referencing. Those kinds of questions. Now, ideally, right, pre-COVID, ideally, we would do this face-to-face in your office or in your workspace. We do recognize that that's not necessarily realistic still for a lot of agencies. Some of you might be working from home. I wouldn't want you to come in my house and look at all my stuff. Some of you may still be under COVID protocol. There could be a variety of reasons. Some of you may be very far away and we would want to schedule, outside of the winter season to give my staff a safe travel to your agency. So ideally, we would like to schedule these one-on-one in person, but we do recognize that that might not always be realistic. But really that discussion is going to be in relation to how the Division of Housing Rental Assistance Programs are being administered at the local level at your agency. The monitoring addresses, and again, this mirrors what HUD and what the Office of the State Auditor are looking for in their monitoring of us. So the monitoring addresses program compliance, any errors, any omissions, missing paperwork, missing verifications, and so on, or fraud through prevention and detection. And then we offer post-review guidance. So after the monitoring and the file audits take place, your SPOC is going to discuss methods of prevention and detection of any potential fraud, fraud opportunity that they see, or errors or old forms or so on, as well as provide some insight on what our quality assurance goals are, what our procedures are, and if there are any agency training needs that you have. Maybe it's, well, I always thought this is how we did the rent reasonable because the person before me showed me and the person before them showed them. So it just gives us an opportunity to go, forget everything you learned from the person before you. Let's talk about what the process is today. Because believe me, those processes have changed throughout the years. And some of us who've been around for a long time remember it a certain way. And then some of our more up-to-date staff, for example, remind us, we don't do it that way anymore. And I learn a lot as well through these monitoring visits. So information obtained during the quality assurance monitoring reviews will help identify and address, again, individual errors, any training needs that we see, an opportunity to redesign our process to make our processes more relevant, maybe update some things to be more in line with how HUD is currently doing their program. And then any agency concerns that you have regarding the program, regarding your, the vouchers that you're administering, any of those things, that this is that opportunity to bring those up. And we use the aggregated results from all of the monitoring and file audits to identify trends. Generally, it's that rent reasonable form. We generally see we need more training or maybe a better streamlined process for the rent reasonable. Verification of disability, things like that. We might see trends where a lot of different agencies sort of understand the process to be a certain way when in actuality it is a different way. And so, and then we host these webinars, right, based on what we find. So that's just a quick overarching summary of the monitoring program. And then I wanted to identify, and I just pulled this from the monitoring tool, areas of substantial impact that we are reviewing during the quality assurance monitoring. That includes the visit to your agency as well as the file audits that are going to occur. So what we're looking for is in terms of the waiting list, were applicants properly placed on the waiting list? Were they correctly drawn or selected from the waiting list? And is the purge process happening, and what does that look like? We want to make sure that family data is accurate, consistent, and thorough. Who's in the family? What is their income? What are their expenses? Does everyone have a social security card or some sort of social security verification has been provided? We also are looking at data verification. Are we following HUD's verification hierarchy when verifying income, assets, expenses, identity? Initial, interim, and annual examinations, are they occurring timely? Is it being done accurately? Are we being thorough when we review the family reporting form based on what the family's reporting? We're looking at subsidy determination. Is it accurately calculated? Is it being done timely? Is it appropriate based on family income and composition? And this is going to include payment standards, utility allowance, rent reasonable, and reasonable accommodation requests. We're looking at HQS inspections. This is a big topic from our HUD audits that we've recently undergone. Are HQS inspections being completed when they are supposed to be? And are they being done on time? Have the deficiencies been documented? Are we following our abatement process? And are the repairs being completed, and or are we canceling that HAP if they are not? And then we'll look at record retention policies that we have in place to make sure the way files and records are retained, your office follows our policy. Okay. So our monitoring tool, I'm going to quick jump to our monitoring tool. Sorry for the clunkiness. So I sent this out to everyone as an attachment. This is our current monitoring tool, subject to change, because as I go through it more, I realize there are some things we need to add and remove. But for right now, this is what our monitoring tool looks like. So this is the document that the SPOC will be going over with your agency when they complete their monitoring. You are obviously getting it in advance because, again, this is we're not trying to trick anyone. We really do want to see how the program's being administered in your office. And these are some of our guiding questions that we want to make sure are addressed. And so, you know, the basic information: who are you? How many vouchers are you currently administering? Again, you see this as housing choice voucher, designed in response to our need to do this for the housing choice voucher program requirements by HUD and the Office of the State Auditor, but this can be adapted for any of our programs. And in fact, we may still be working on making this a more universal form. For now, we're just focusing on housing choice voucher. The agency name, the number of vouchers, what city and county you're located in, what staff was present from your agency at the monitoring, and who your supervisor is, because we want everybody involved in understanding the work that's being done. Again, this isn't like we're going to tell your supervisor or you know, what we find. What I find to be important, and this is no shade to supervisors, nor is it any shade to my old supervisor when I worked at the local mental health center in Adams County doing this program. My supervisor didn't know what I did in the housing program. They knew that there was a housing program. They knew our participants in the community were being housed. They knew an admin fee was being paid to the agency every month, but they didn't know what I did day to day. And the more that supervisor became involved in our audits that we had, the more I think it opened their eyes to how much work it really takes to manage this program and to administer this program, and what the results mean for your community. So it's important, if your supervisor has an opportunity to participate in the monitoring, we do like to invite them as well. We just have some details about when the date was that we monitored. Of course, the last DOH monitoring, that's going to be a 2019 date that we'll have to look up because it's been a long time. Who your staff is, if there was any other DOH staff present. And this is important, and we're going to get in line right now. I think 2023 is going to be our kind of jumping back into it year. So we might not have things aligned just right. But ideally for monitoring, you will have had your file audits occur prior to the monitoring visit. And so file audits we'll talk about later in this webinar, but those are coming as well in 2023. We are required by HUD to audit a percentage of our files every year. We have gotten away with not having to do that because of COVID waivers that were approved, but we have to do them this fiscal year. This fiscal year ends June 30th of 2023. And so ideally, we will have audited 5% or so of your files, depending on the size of your agency, and we'll have those results. You will have those results prior to the visit. So during the monitoring, we can look at those file audits and see that, okay, we see this trend, right, with these files. We see you're using an old form for these files. And then we can bring that into the conversation in the monitoring. This next year, 2023, it may not align, but you will be having some file audits as well as a monitoring in 2023. Following 2023, we will have it aligned. The form just goes over some of our objectives with the monitoring, what tools we are using, where the guidelines can be found for our quality assurance. It's our admin plan. It's our Section 8 Management Assessment Program, or CMAP. And it's any of our trainings or handouts, directives, our process manuals on the website, our action alerts, and so on. We're using all of those guidelines to sort of gauge why we're coming out, why we're looking at what we're looking at. Do we need to do more of those trainings, more of those action alerts based on our findings? We had a whole slide on what we're looking at. And we'll just, again, I'm not going to sit here and read this whole form to you, but I do want you to see what is going to be really highlighted in the visit. It starts with where it starts, right? The waiting list. When you get applications from new potential participants, we're going to ask a bunch of questions. Are you purging your waiting list? Do you know how many available vouchers you have? Do you run the waiting list out of Elite, or do you know how to request the waiting list from your SPOC out of Elite? Show us the letters you send to invite them to briefings. Do you know how to see how many vouchers you have searching or on the street at any given time? Let's see, how do you notify applicants when they are determined to be ineligible? Show us that, show us that letter that you use. Talk to us about your public notice for when you open the waiting list. What does that look like? What marketing strategies do you use? So on. Next, we'll dig into the briefing and determining eligibility. So again, kind of following that natural process. When an applicant comes to the top of the waiting list, you invite them to a briefing. Show us the system you use to check background. Are you using CBI or something else? Are you checking the sex offender public website? Are you checking the EIV debts owed or existing tenant before issuing that voucher? We want to see how you're conducting briefings. Are they being done remotely? Are they being done in person? Is it a hybrid? Show us the briefing packet that you're using. Show us the list of landlords or other properties that you've had luck with in the past in sending voucher holders. Of course, that question gets a little tricky with our source of income discrimination law that was passed in the state of Colorado. We can't really say, show us a list of landlords who will accept vouchers when we know they all have to accept vouchers, but more along the lines of that list of landlords that you've had good luck with, who have been good participants or partners for our voucher holders. Let's see, talk about the portability process. We want to talk about the HUD's hierarchy. This is a great opportunity to learn more about that. If you're not familiar with what the hierarchy is, we want to look at your different verification forms that you're using. And then we do offer a time to say, is there any guidance that you need from us on this process? What trainings would you like on this process? And that's something that you and your SPOC can schedule sometime in the future. Let's talk about medical expenses. We've got medical expense trainings we can do in a couple hours or less, probably not less because it's a lot. But maybe your SPOC can schedule a time for you and your team to just do a Friday afternoon medical expense training. That's terrible for Friday afternoon, a Thursday afternoon medical expense training. This is the time to ask for that. You can ask for it at any time, but this is a really good time to have that one-on-one conversation with your SPOC. Next, we move into lease up. We really want to see that rent reasonable form you're using to make sure that it is in compliance with the HUD regs. I know a lot of you have your own rent reasonable forms because you have your own voucher programs. And I've actually seen your forms or the systems you use, and they are so good. And so I, selfishly want to see that. So then maybe I can look to improve the way we do rent reasonable. Of course, we have to do it for the whole state, all 64 counties. It gets a little complex, but anything we can do to make our form more efficient or our process more efficient for others, this is a great opportunity for us to see some different procedures. Again, if you are an agency who administers voucher programs in addition to the Division of Housing's programs, your own programs, or perhaps you are a voucher administrator for the Denver Housing Authority or the Aurora Housing Authority in addition to the Division of Housing, we want to see what utility allowance schedule you're using to make sure you're using the correct one for the correct program. How do you access DOH forms? Some of you have filing cabinets where you just have 100 copies of the release of information, and you just pull it, all the files to create that packet. Some of you just print it from the website each time. Some of you have created a PDF of all the required forms and just print it. We want to see, again, are they the current forms? And do you have a process that we can share with others that is a best practice? So that's sort of twofold. We want to see that everything is the current form. We also want to see how we can improve the process for others. We're gonna do a little role play, show us how you provide an overview of the HAP contract to the landlord. It's important that our landlords and our property owners that participate in this program understand that contract that they are signing with the state, with the housing authority, what their requirements are. Do they have all three parts of the HAP contracts? We want to make sure that you understand the purpose of that HAP contract and how you're presenting it to the property owner, the landlord, at the time that you're asking them to sign the contract. And then we just want to confirm that you are sending a copy of that completed, executed, all three parts of the HAP contract to the landlords once everything has been done with the action. And then we're curious what resources or assistance that you're providing or sharing with families in your community who might be having difficulty in the rental market. Again, that's a selfish ask. I'm always working on our resource list here at the Division of Housing. So it's helpful to have what really works in local communities versus what I see on the internet, which isn't always up to date. We'll dig into the HQS a little bit. We want to see how you're scheduling them, what reports in Elite that you have access to or that you're receiving from your SPOC that you use, how you're tracking them. What does your inspection kit look like? Do you even do inspections, or are you contracting with another entity to do your inspections? Just those kinds of questions. And then we want to make sure if you are using a contract inspector outside of your agency, have they completed the Division of Housing HQS certification? And are they lead-based paint certified? Those are the requirements to do inspections for the Division of Housing. We'll look at your annual and interim examination processes. When do you send out the initial letter? Are you using EIV currently to get your income reports out of the EIV system? How are you reviewing any discrepancies you might find between what's on EIV and what the family is reporting to you? What's that conversation look like with the family? We'll dig into tenant conferences and the termination process. We want to know what sort of violations that you're scheduling tenant conferences for. We've got it in our admin plan, but we're just curious what's the most frequent thing you're seeing for these tenant conferences. We don't hear about the tenant conferences until it's termination time. So this is just an opportunity for us to see kind of what you're dealing with on a daily, weekly basis with some of our participants. We're curious about how you're completing the tenant conference process. Are you using that tenant conference checklist? Do you know how to calculate repayment agreements and do the tenant conference for unreported income? That's not a trick question. Repayment agreements, we've tried to simplify, and I think we have simplified the process tremendously, but maybe you missed that webinar or that email and you're doing it the hard way. We want to make sure you're using our new process, which is very easy. I don't know. Math isn't my strength, so it might still be challenging for me, but I think it's much easier than how we have been doing it. We just want to make sure that you're using that system. And again, do you need additional guidance from us? Do you want a repayment agreement training? Is that something that your SPOC can schedule for you? And when you conduct an informal hearing, if you have conducted an informal hearing, who do you use as your hearing officer? What process are you following? Do you use that script or that procedural that we provided, or do you have some other expertise? I know there are some agencies that have an informal hearing panel because they do other housing programs. So they just sort of share with each other, okay, this is your housing program. I'll be your informal hearing. If I need one for my housing program that I'm doing down the hall, can I use you? Again, that's awesome best practice that we can pull to share with our other agencies who may be struggling with finding informal hearing officers. And then finally, we're going to look at the file retention. Where do you store your files? Are they digital or electronic? Or do you have hard copies that are on site? Are they in the basement? Are they in the storage building, in the parking lot? I'm speaking from experience there. When a file becomes inactive, are you storing it for at least 5 years? For PSH, I believe that's 6 years. And for state housing vouchers, I believe that's 6 years. So again, there's an area where we can update this form. And do you have your own record retention policy that your agency has that might be more strict than ours? We're curious to see that at that time. There's a place for notes. So the SPOC who will be completing the monitoring might just be jotting things down. They would like a medical expense training. Please provide, resource for whatever, just an opportunity. And then we'll ask everyone who's present to sign the form, just agreeing that the conversation took place. Okay. So let me go back to are there any unanswered questions, D and or KD, about KD, Kimberly, about the file monitoring that
we have not had any questions yet.
Okay, great. So let's move on to the file audits. Such a terrible word, the A word, file reviews, but I say audit throughout this whole presentation. So the Division of Housing has been so fortunate to have undergone 3 audits since COVID began. That is more than we have undergone in a very long time. Having one every single year, there was one where there was overlap in between the audits. So 3 years, but really it happened in 2 years. I don't know if it's because people were not leaving their homes, and so HUD and the state auditor just had time, but we sure were the target of several audits. And through those audits, there were some very good findings that that we need to improve on. So I guess that's the silver lining. It gives us an opportunity to strengthen our programs and to make our program a little more audit proof, as I like to say. Some of those audit findings that we have experienced are in reference to the waitlist purge process. It was found that our wait lists weren't current. There was a lot of vouchers that were issued that were never, or drawn from the wait list that were never formally issued because the participants were gone, couldn't be reached, no longer needed it, moved out of state, had passed away, various different, or received a voucher in another program. And so the result was that we need to purge our waiting lists more frequently. And that is some guidance that we can provide to you all through the monitoring and through future webinars on what that looks like. But I think the key takeaway is that if we want to get vouchers into people's hands who need them today, and we don't lose any time on that resource. So if HUD sees we've got 1,000 vouchers searching right now who have never leased up, they'll say, that's too many. These people should be leasing up right away. You should be able to find these people right away. So purging our wait list and making sure we have the most up-to-date contact information, the most up-to-date preferences, the most up-to-date need will allow us to get vouchers in hands sooner. Some of the files were missing that original pre-application or application and any supporting documentation to support what the preference that they chose, that they have a social security card. That was strangely one of the things they looked for, a social security card or verification of social security on everybody in the household at the time of application. Now, some of you may recall this audit, and the participants had applied and came onto the program in some cases in 1998. We were on like file number 7. And some of that stuff, either in 1998, we weren't collecting. I mean, I don't know how many of you were doing this program in 1998. I'm a couple of years away from doing it, but I wasn't yet. It was hard for me to defend why I don't have an application from 1998. I think I did a good job, but we want to truly make sure all the new people that we're bringing into the program, we have all those required documents. Yes, there are files that were ported to us. There were some transferred files, so you don't have control over what that previous agency or previous PHA sent you. And we did our best to try and track back to get them. But just making sure you have everything in that part 1 of your file is critical to an audit. Boy, rent reasonable certifications, I don't know, as long as I live. This is going to be one of our troubled spots. It's not specific to any agency or any decade. This just is consistently a very tricky certification, but they were requested in several of the audits. Some of the forms were either old forms, not the right form for what we were trying to do with it, or they just simply were not there in the file. So that's why our file audits that we will be doing will really be digging into is everything here. You may not realize we needed a certain form. So this is that opportunity to take a peek at the files. And then, as I mentioned earlier, our failed inspection, HQS inspection and abatement process was not great. And I do believe they're going to be retesting us on that in this 2023 audit that's coming. So we want to really take a peek at your inspections in your file to make sure, and during the monitoring, to make sure we have a good understanding of timelines and the process when an inspection fails. So why are we doing file audits? What is that going to entail? There are 3 guiding reasons why we'll be doing our file audits again. The first one is CMAP, or the Section 8 Management Assessment Program. That's HUD's report card. That's us telling HUD what we've done for the year. And by the way, HUD knows what we've done for the year because we are every week submitting all of our 50058s from Elite to them. So they are very aware of what we're doing, what we're spending, but they want us to tell them, right? like file your taxes, but we know how much you owe us, but file your taxes anyway. It's sort of a similar idea to that. They want to see that we can back up all of the data we've sent to them. And part of that includes a percentage of our files were audited. We have our original, what they refer to as the file technician. That's anyone who's administering the program, is doing the initial verifications, data entering it, double checking it. We do desk audits because that comes to the SPOCs who do an overview of what's been entered or what's been submitted. But then we have to do an official, the person other than who completed the file, worked on the file, has to take a look at it to make sure it was done correctly. That's considered a file audit. And we have to do a certain percentage for CMAP. So that's really one of the guiding reasons why we will be doing file audits. In addition, the state audits that we have annually, they want to see that we are actually looking at the files, and it's not the first time we're seeing something when they ask for it. And then just general program compliance. I mean, in any program, you need a good quality assurance program. You need a second set of eyes, sometimes a third set of eyes, to look at the work that's being done. At the end of the day, we are spending federal dollars, and we want to be sure we're spending those federal dollars correctly. We're not overspending on a family. We're not underspending on a family, that each of our families that we're assisting is getting the correct amount of assistance, so that HUD continues to see us as a high performing agency and considers us when they have new vouchers to give. So that's truly the main reasons why we're doing our file audits. We also want to provide good technical assistance to you, our partners, who I know many of you have taken on a role that was left by someone who maybe wasn't able to stay and train you in-house. And our SPOCs do a great job training, but they can't be with you every single day looking at everything. And so we want to kind of look at your calculations, how you're capturing documentation, signature review, that kind of stuff. We want to just give you that assurance that you're doing it the right way. You will hear from our office in early 2023 a list of files that we will be auditing. It's going to be around 5% of the number of files that you currently administer for the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Ideally, that's where the majority of our file reviews and file audits will be taking place. Again, we may be asking for other program files as well. But for purposes of CMAP, we have to do at least 5% of your caseload. Now, if you're a smaller agency and 5% equals 2 files, we will look at a minimum of 5 files just to get a good picture of how things are being done in your office. It is easiest if these files could be sent to us in a digital format. What we have found to work, and I know this is not consistent with everyone's IT department, is that the Division of Housing will create a shared Google Drive for, say, Community Reach Center. I've created a shared Google Drive. I'm going to share it with just the staff that works at Community Reach Center so they can upload the stuff that we're needing for the file audit. That is ideal, although we do have other means of collecting files, and the results of what we find will be provided to your agency so you know what was found in the audit. That's a lot of words. I think I just copied and pasted from our file audit checklist. And actually, we'll probably take a quick look at what that checklist entails. But there are 2 tabs on the checklist. The first tab is this form here? Check. Is this form here? Check. Is this form here? Check. Really just looking at, are all the forms that should be here for this action present? Are all the original part 1 of the file, the application, the preference verification, is that all here? Check, check, check. Then there's another tab. This is an Excel spreadsheet that was sent to you where our file auditor is going to go through and look at the most recent payable action other than interim they're going to hand calculate all the pay stubs that are in the file, how many dependents, what the medical expenses are on tab 2 of this file audit checklist. Then they're going to compare to what was entered into the 50058 to see if there's a discrepancy. The checklist is going to serve multiple purposes. You all can use it as a form of quality assurance on your end. I know, like me, you probably have lots of free time where you can just go through your files. But in reality, I look back to when we were having like the spot audit where I knew the state was coming. I just didn't know what files they were going to be looking at. I had, I think, 150 files at the time. So a couple weeks leading up to that audit, not that anyone has this time today, but we would just look, me and a couple other people, look through every single file, our little checklist. Is this missing? Can I recreate it? And so on. So it's just an opportunity if you have like Quality Assurance Friday, where you just take 10 files and you just take a look at them yourselves to see what you see in the file. We will use it for our own file audits. And then there's additional monitoring that the Office of Homeless Initiatives has to do, particularly for their permanent supportive housing program. I think some of you may have recently undergone that as well. So we use this form for that team as well. So I want to go through and just show you, oh my word, show you what that looks like. Okay, so this was sent to you. This is that tab 1 where the auditor, they're just going to say who you are, what day they did the file review, what participant that they reviewed, what action. Now, an auditable action is either going to be a new admission, a move, or an annual reexamination. And it's going to be the most recent one of those 3 that occurred in the fiscal year that we have to audit for. We will tell you what we're looking for because we're going to be asking you to sending it to us electronically. So we'll tell you we need the November 2021 annual re-exam to look at for this fiscal year or whatever it is that we're auditing. And then the auditor is just going to look at, okay, the initial and identifying documents. Do we have the application? Check. Is the certificate of applicant briefing in the file? Check. And so on. Some things are applicable, some things are not applicable, but they'll go through all of these sections of the file to see if the documents that need to be in the file are there. A little note section for what might be missing or what might be there but not signed, and so on. And then the next page is our calculation, or the next tab is our calculation. So this is where the auditor will go through and say, okay, I see wages and it is, no, that's a bad example. I see SSDI and it's $1,200 a month. So you'll see this form automatically will say, great, then that should be $14,400 a year. Okay, they also have child support, and that's $200 a month. Great, now we've added $2,400. You're gonna see in row 8, column I, it's telling the auditor what she or he or they will see on that 50058. If this file was calculated correctly, this 16,800 should match what's on the 50058. They'll add a couple other things in. Was there wages? Let's count those paycheck stubs. Do they have any income earned from assets? We're going to punch that in here. How many dependents do they have? They have 2. So now we have that dependent allowance automatically calculated. Childcare, disability allowance, out-of-pocket medical expenses, and so on. They're going to type in, so my auditor is going to be looking at the lease and they're going to see, cool, the rent was $1,500. I see that on the lease. The lease says they pay gas and electric in this 3-bedroom apartment. No way, that would never be the price for a 3-bedroom apartment. You know what I mean? So that utility allowance is $100. The auditor isn't doing this math based on what's in the file, except they're looking at the lease. And then they are calculating on their own utility allowance spreadsheet to make sure that what they're coming up with independently matches what you have provided and was on the 50058. This is terrible math. I'm not paying good enough attention here. But this line 62 and 63 is what's on the 50058 and what the auditor calculated. This automatically populates line 63 based on what the auditor is seeing in the file and calculating. Then they are going to manually enter what was submitted on the 5.8. The goal is that this number in line 64 column I is 0, meaning the difference between what the auditor found and what was submitted matches. It's a really poor performance of the audit file form, but hopefully you get the idea of what we're doing on that audit file checklist, file audit checklist. Some tools that we use and that you can use to prepare for a file audit or just to have your files audit proof. That checklist I just provided. In the email, I sent the Division of Housing's external audit process sheet that walks you through what to expect from a file audit. We have our forms checklist. Come on this journey with me. Here's that file audit process that I sent. Again, if you didn't get the attachments, because there were a lot of attachments, we will have them on the website as well. We have our forms checklist. This is handy, especially, well, it's handy for anyone, but especially if you're new and you want to know, I'm doing a new admission. What forms do I need to have in the file? This tells you what forms you need to have in the file. And then you can find these forms on our website on the forms page so that you can print out everything and you know that you're going to have an audit proof file because you followed this forms checklist. We have it for new admission. We have it for annual re-exams, if there's a move, and so on. We also would refer you to use our file or cover pages, depending on if you use 2-part files, 4-part files, or 6-part files. This is also a helpful what should be in this section. And I provided that to you in the email as well. And it differs based on what type of files you use. And this, by the way, can also work for electronic files. You just need to do it in a digital format. One thing I didn't go over, but this is going to be part of the monitoring, is are these signs posted in your office where participants will see them? We are required as housing providers to have the fair housing, equal housing opportunity signs posted so that participants receiving housing assistance or applying for housing assistance understands what their rights are. We have the English and Spanish version of this form. You can print them out now and put them on your wall. I would suggest doing it in a blue or a green or something pleasing to the eye, or bright orange, whatever it takes for people to be able to see them. Okay, let me go back one. And then I just wanted to point everyone's attention to a wonderful webinar that our very own Dee Horton presented in October of 2021. It was an in-depth dive into those the file order cover pages and the importance of using the checklist to make sure you have a complete file. Dee was our former file auditor and trainer, and so they had a very good awareness of what files should look like. And this was a webinar right up their alley. So really would encourage you to take a look at that. Okay, before I move on to updates, do we have any questions on the file audit process?
None that have not been answered.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so that was our monitoring program and our file audits. Coming soon to a 2023 near you. Again, I have a lot of new staff and I have a lot of not new staff who haven't done monitoring since 2019. So we are all going to get ourselves ready and trained before we come and see you. But we will be requesting prior to the monitoring, you will be hearing from my office requesting files be sent to us to audit, because again, the monitoring is important and it's a bonus, but we have to do the file audits for our report card to HUD. That is no flexibility there. So just stay tuned, pay attention to your email. Those requests will be coming following the new year. But I want to take this time just to give you a couple updates on some new staff that we have on our team. Some of you may already have heard from the new staff because they have been assigned caseloads, but we want to welcome back to our team Dee Horton, who took a small sabbatical to try out some different teams at the Division of Housing, but found their way back to us. So grateful to have Dee back on the team and the wealth of knowledge, particularly as we enter our monitoring and file audit season that Dee brings. And I'd also like to introduce, although I don't think she is on the webinar today, maybe she is, Whitney Garcia, who is also hired as one of our single point of contacts, or SPOCs. Dee is also one of our SPOCs. Whitney comes to us from the Grand Junction Housing Authority. And in fact, Whitney still lives in what we call Junction. Those of you who live in Grand Junction know it's called Junction. That was a new thing for me to learn. So we have awesome representation on the Western Slope, which is really cool. If there's any goodness that came from a worldwide terrible pandemic, it's that a lot of agencies realize that we can do the good work that we do from anywhere, from our home, from our car, sometimes from the parking lot at your kid's soccer game. We are able to bring you amazing work from any corner of the state. And so we have been very excited to be able to branch out and hire staff in Grand Junction, in Pueblo, in Colorado Springs, to really cover the corners of the state that sometimes we don't. And so welcome Dee and Whitney. We've also hired a new internal residential coordinator who is taking on the emergency housing voucher program, and fingers crossed the stability voucher program should the Division of Housing be awarded in February of 2023, and that is Jennifer Malinan. And we are very excited to have another internal staff to really take on that direct administration of our vouchers, similar to what our BASH team currently does in-house. I think having internal staff who is doing the work that you all are doing provides us really, really awesome perspective of what our expectations and requests are that we are making to you. We can ask our BASH and our EHV team, is this reasonable? Does this make sense? How are we doing this file management? Can I share that with our external partners? So welcome new staff. Very excited to be fully staffed. Some other updates. We are starting our contract renewal process. Existing agency contracts, they were 5-year contracts executed in July of 2018, are coming up on renewal June of 2023. It is a long process. So I will be starting it in January of 2023. I don't know what it is yet or how I'm starting it. I'm meeting with our contracting team, who we did not have in 2018 when we executed our contracts. So I'm going to learn what the preferred process is. So you may want to alert your executive and management staff that they will be hearing from me soon. I think what the process will be is me reaching out to all of you and asking for critical contact information for executive directors, immediate supervisors, and so on, because the information I have is a bit outdated. But stay tuned for that. And any questions about contract renewal can come to me. I'm happy to answer them if I can. We are excited to announce that HUD has approved one of our waivers that we had that expires on December 31st of this year. We have been approved to apply the new payment standard at any time to our participants. So for example, our new payment standards go into effect in a week or so, January 1st. But we may have participants who don't have an annual re-exam until April. But with this waiver, if the new payment standard would benefit our families, we can complete an interim with an effective date of January 1st, February 1st, whatever, to give them the new payment standard if it is a benefit to them. That is great. We can do that through December 31st, excuse me, of 2023. And then finally, please stay tuned if you administer the state housing voucher program. We are very excited. We did a webinar, I think a couple months ago. Let me take a quick sip of water. A couple months ago about the Flex program, which is similar to the Family Self-Sufficiency program. We are looking for agencies that administer the state housing voucher program who might be interested in participating in this new program that's funded by the state. That it's financial literacy. Oh gosh, I'm the worst. It's sort of a savings program for participants on our state housing voucher program. Like I said, similar to the Family Self-Sufficiency program. So if they begin working and they are experiencing an increase in their portion of rent, when that happens, the state will match that increase and deposit it into an escrow account for them. After 5 years, they would be able, if they have successfully met their goals, access that escrow account to use for home ownership, purchasing a vehicle, and so on and so forth. It's a really cool opportunity. If you administer an SHV program, stay tuned. The eligibility form will be provided soon. And with that, I am happy to take any questions if we have any. Dee.
We have one question in the chat. I thought we should talk about, is there documentation of the retractment of prescription medicine in the names of files? We're supposed to remove any prescription medicine names, correct? And I think they're just talking about redacting medical information.
Correct. So having not reviewed the medical expense training recently, good file management procedure is to redact anything that would identify a person's medical diagnoses or disability, to take that out. We still need to see that there's out-of-pocket medical expenses, but if it's for, I mean, let me just be really generic, Prozac, right? We associate Prozac with a mental health diagnosis. And so just being able to redact that is important. We do have the medical expense calculation form where the agency, you sit down ideally with the participant. Okay, you provided me with these receipts for Walgreens. So I'm going to say Walgreens, $700 a month. That's a lot. But I know some people have that much in prescriptions, so $70 a month. Do you agree? Yes, great. So then we're just going to throw those receipts out. That's one process. The other one would be to redact, but then we rely on that calculation form that shows us we looked at everything. I signed it, the participant signed it, that they agreed. So we're good for the year. That kind of offers you the opportunity to get that personal information out of the file. And then the participant agrees, yep, I'm not going to come back and say you calculated it wrong because today I'm agreeing with you. I can resubmit everything if I don't believe it was calculated correctly. So that's one option. Redacting is another option, blacking out any identifying information that could associate a particular disability or diagnosis, and then keeping a separate file for those participants who have a lot of medical expenses, complex expenses. They might change. We might be giving them a reasonable accommodation to count everything they spent last year for this year. And you don't want to lose that. You can keep a separate file away from their housing file locked up so that upon audits, the auditor can't see what this person may have. They still have that calculation form or spreadsheet or however you do it, saying, yes, we agree. And then if they needed to review it, it's in a separate file. Now, I hope that that aligns with what we have taught in the past, but that is my recollection of how we handle that very confidential information.
Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, and one follow-up question. So the medical calculation form needs to be signed by the participant as well as us, correct?
I haven't seen that form in a while. I feel like we might have taken the signature out because of how it was being used. I can't confirm that, but good practice is if we are choosing to not keep those receipts in the file, to get rid of them or to give them back to the participant once we've calculated them, or if we're redacting important information, I think it is good practice to have the tenant or the participant sign somewhere on that form just to say, I agree to what I'm seeing here, because we don't want to have that disagreement 6 months down the road. You didn't count my dentist appointment that I had that cost me $300. Well, we did, because we said dentist $300 right here and you signed it. So I think that it's good practice. I'm going to have to go back and look. I am hearing we should do a medical expense training or webinar in 2023 because I obviously need to attend it to make sure I'm giving you the correct information.
Great.
Anything else?
I don't see anything else yet.
Well, we can give you all whatever time, 55 minutes back. Thank you all for attending. Stay tuned. We're going to have a new webinar schedule soon for 2023. I don't know what soon means, but before the next webinar, we'll have that out to you all. I hope you all have wonderful holiday season for whatever holiday you may celebrate, if you celebrate. And for those of us in the entire state who are about to have the coldest day in 30 years, please stay warm and keep your faucets dripping so they don't freeze, and bring your pets inside. And with that, I will stop recording and say goodbye until next year.